she escorts me into the bathroom, and it's literally just a bathroom with a computer in it. And I'm ready, game day ready. I know this is my time to shine, but there is a lot of pressure because I'm expected to jizz into a small plastic cup like I'm trying to win a prize at a state fair. And this woman's on the other side of the door doing the Wordle. Now, I immediately notice there's a computer that's open to Pornhub. And I start thinking about how whatever's on that screen is whatever the last guy searched for, because they're not clearing the search history at the end of each session. So then I start thinking about all the hilarious things that I could leave on there when I'm done. Circus porn, 3 clowns gangbang the bearded lady, the Easter bunny having oral sex with Santa Claus, and my comedy brain takes over, and suddenly I can't concentrate on the task at hand. So I'm like trying to get back in the zone, and that's when I notice there's a set of instructions on the wall, and it's labeled 1 through 7. And it's pretty standard. 1, sanitize your hands. 2, write your name on the cup. All the way down to number 7, but number 7 was particularly intriguing to me because number 7 said, if you cannot masturbate to completion, please ask us about alternative methods. And I like alternative methods. Maybe I don't have to do this by myself after all.
And we'll find out what alternative methods are later in this episode. Hi, I'm Lauren Tassi.
And I'm Alex Hooper.
And welcome back to Hopefully Kidding. This is a real, raw, honest, and sometimes hilarious story of our journey to parenthood and how the path did not look like it did in the pamphlet.
If you're just joining us, by the way, quick recap of episode 1. We got married. 2 months later, I got cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma. And at the end of the very last episode, Lauren had taken a pregnancy test and she had walked out of the bathroom.
Before we get back to it, just quick heads up. This episode has some heavy topics in it. We'll try to give you a heads up. But if you're feeling particularly sensitive right now, it might not be the best time to listen.
There are going to be trigger warnings, but we can't talk about this without having some serious issues come up. And we're going to make inappropriate jokes. I'm going to tell you that right now. That's what we do.
This whole show is a trigger warning full of inappropriate jokes.
Yeah, I like that. The whole show is that. That's so funny that our last episode ended in a bathroom, and now we started this episode in a bathroom, which is a later story. We'll get into that in a second. But now you walk out of the bathroom, pregnancy test in hand. What happens next?
Alex, I'm pregnant.
Which I remember just immediately crying. I just stood up and I cried and I hugged you. But at the same time, I was thinking like, no, like this is not good timing for this. 2 days before I found out I had cancer. How am I going to deal with a pregnancy on top of the treatment that I'm about to receive?
First of all, my initial response was like, are you freaking kidding me? This was the first time we tried and I did it. Like, wow, I really am good at getting things done, like setting goals and hitting them. My other thing was, I was very concerned about your going through treatment and everything there. But I was also like, we got 9 months, bud. We're going to be okay. The whole plan was 6 months of chemo. I was like, perfect timing. We're going to be going through chemo. I'll be pregnant. We'll just like both be like huddled under a blanket for a while and doing it together.
It was our first time, and props to your IUD, by the way, because that little piece of copper took a beating over that decade. The fact that it happened right away was pretty extraordinary, but you talked me into it. You said, because I wasn't sure this was good timing, you were like, no, Alex, now you have all the reason to beat this illness. On the other side of it, there is a baby. So the next few months might be difficult, but we know we have the motivation to get through this because of what's on the other side. And I like that mentality. You were very good at reframing the moment because I was freaking out.
Yeah, I mean, as expected, you kind of freak out about a lot of things.
Yeah,
like
the smallest things will make me freak out for a second. I'm very resistant to change.
We had this like beautiful, joyful little secret between the two of us as it appeared that our world was crumbling around us, but this like spark of hope, that's where I was at that point in time.
And I will say, I did not make a YouTube video immediately announcing that we were pregnant. It was not the same as cancer. This was our secret. So people knew about the cancer, but this one we knew, hey, we just took a pregnancy test. It is very early. You don't start shouting to the world yet that you are expecting a baby.
Yeah. So here's the crazy part that I had no clue at the time. It's Friday afternoon. I'm like, oh, I have to call my OBGYN and go in for an appointment, but it's like a holiday weekend. So now I have to wait like 4 days to call. I'm like, oh my God, what 4 days? And then I call for this appointment and they're like, when was your last period? And I was like, knew exactly. I was like, I can't even tell you what day. I think I ovulated. And they're like, okay, great. We'll see you on October 4th. Wait a second. That's a month from now. You're telling me I have to wait a month to go see a doctor to confirm all this and get the official next steps? I want to get this train rolling.
Why do you have to wait a month?
Because they can't see the baby. Like in a typical OBGYN outside of a fertility clinic, they can't see the baby. There's really nothing they can do for it. Things I have learned much more as you go down this path is if it's not looking good in those first few weeks, there's really nothing to do. Fertility clinics will monitor you, especially like through your blood work and that, because that's what they do. But a typical OBGYN is not going to just see someone on their first pregnancy before that 7 or 8 weeks because there's nothing for them to see. There's nothing for them to do.
They're not just waiting in the bathroom while you pee on a stick going, here we go. Could it be?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose in retrospect, I would have been like, oh, can I come in and confirm this with a blood pregnancy test or whatever? But I didn't know. I had one stick that had the 2 lines. I'm pregnant.
Yeah. Check out my cervical mucus, girl.
So naturally, the person I am is like, all right, well, I have to learn everything possible about being a pregnant person. I downloaded all the podcasts. I went to the library. I got all the books. I literally just like became a scholar at being pregnant and childbirth. In between the time where we found out we were pregnant and we went to see the doctor, I had read all these books. I was basically like shopping for a doula, right? I was like, oh, do I want a midwife or do I want a doctor? Like I was just fully down that path, making all these decisions about what that would look like, even like, how are we going to decorate the nursery? Just these things you do when you're pregnant.
This is typical you behavior, by the way, because I learned just by going along and doing. Whereas if you want to know about something, you study hard immediately. And that's a very different thing between us is I just kind of go with the flow and you are like, no, I want to know before we go down this path what is about to happen so I can best prepare myself. And props to you for doing all that, because if it was up to me, like honestly, you would be pregnant and just the further along you went, I'd be like, what do we need? Like a crib or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people do it that way, or at least younger people. You just sort of figure it out as you go, where I just like, it's a control thing for me, right? Like I want to be prepared. I want to know what I'm getting into. I want to know all my choices. It's like when we're watching Netflix and I have to scan through every single thing on the TV.
Oh my God. Do not ever watch Netflix with Lauren. It will take you an hour and a half to end up watching something that is 20 minutes long because she needs to look through it. She doesn't even read descriptions, by the way. She just goes by the fucking cover of whatever it is, which you can barely see in a wide screen. Anyway, we are getting off topic and I will get furious if we talk about this.
Yes. Okay. So that's what's going on in my body. Let's talk about what's going on in your body at this time.
Yeah. So I have gotten my diagnosis and I've gotten my treatment plan, which means, okay, cancer, it is time. Thank you very much for visiting, but it is time for you to check out of Hotel Alex. So they say, they tell me that I'm going to get chemotherapy and I'm going to have to do 12 rounds of it over 6 months. Every 2 weeks, I'm going to go and get chemotherapy. And the easiest way to do that is to install a chemo port. I've never had a surgery before. I didn't know anything about this. A chemo port is this little tiny port that they surgically put inside of your chest. It's basically right kind of below your neck, above your right nipple is the easiest way to say it. And that way, instead of you having to do a PICC line, which is the thing you see in some people's arm that like wraps around and goes inside, you have to keep it clean. It has a lot more chance of infection. They're going to put in this chemo port. It goes under the skin. I never have to think about it. You can barely even tell it's there. And whenever I get chemo, they inject a needle and immediately, bam, I am ready to go.
Yeah, it was a very minor surgery. I remember I literally like dropped you off in the morning, picked you up. I didn't even wait. It wasn't like a concerning kind of thing. I was like, I'm just going to go home and you call me when you need to get picked up.
Yeah, and I had never had anesthesia before. So it was one of those twilight moments when you are suddenly asleep and you wake up and go, when are we doing the surgery? And they're like, we're done. You can get out of here. Go home. And I went skipping out of the hospital as I usually do, came home and just passed out on the couch because typical me, I had a show that night.
Yep. No slowing down.
No slowing down. I was at the Comedy Store that night and I felt great. And the show, it wasn't a traditional stand-up show. It was the show that my friends did called Culture Court. Because this was a few weeks after my diagnosis, we already knew I had announced it. My friend said, hey, do you want to do this fake trial where you got cancer because a doctor did something wrong? And I was like, oh, that's a fun idea. So we do this trial and I had just gotten the surgery that day. So it is fresh. In the middle of the show, I rip off my shirt and stand there showing my surgery to everybody. And the creators of this show thought it'd be a funny idea to be like, everybody come up and heal Alex. We're all going to touch him at the same time. He really has cancer. I'm not thinking that this is a bad idea by any means. I am saying, hey, don't touch my fucking surgical port that was just put in here. There's clearly a fresh wound. And even the creator of the show is like, hey, back up from him a little bit. Back up. We're touching him emotionally. It was very cathartic for me to do that show. Everyone was on my side. People knew about it. I don't know. It was just really nice to be on stage. And I remember one of my friends going, that was some real comedian shit. That was true, honest, funny, just vulnerable. That was everything that's great about you as a comedian. So I felt amazing. And now here we go into chemotherapy.
So there were a couple things that had to happen before you could start chemotherapy. You had to get your lungs checked out. You had to get your heart checked out. It was a baseline situation so they could make sure the chemo wasn't affecting you negatively anywhere else. The other thing was sperm freezing. It was a conversation that was had with us basically immediately as soon as you had the diagnosis that if you want to have children in the future, you should immediately consider banking your sperm because the chemo very likely could make you infertile.
Right, which I had heard before, but you don't really think about it until you're in that situation, that whatever's in that medicine can severely alter your sperm to the fact where it doesn't want to work as a spermie anymore.
So they told us, you're going to want to do this. As we're going through this, concerned about finances, right? Luckily, we have regular health insurance, so it wasn't going to be hundreds and thousands of dollars out of pocket for cancer treatment, but the sperm freezing, that's not covered. I am immediately Googling this and I find out there's actually all sorts of programs out there that are meant for people like us, people going through cancer who still want to have children, who need some help. So I found a clinic nearby that it was either low cost or no cost thanks to Livestrong, Lance Armstrong's program. Thank you. Also, if anybody's going through anything like that, like there are resources, just do some Googling. You can always send one of us a message too and I can help. I basically set up an appointment and sent you off to the clinic.
It turns out I could not just keep it in my freezer next to the ice cream. I went to this clinic and that's where we began this episode, was me in the clinic. And I remember walking in there super nervous. And like you've learned, when I'm nervous, I make jokes. So I go in there and the woman says, okay, are you ready? She gives me a plastic cup and a brown paper bag. And I looked at her and said, I don't need the bag. I'm dining in. I thought that was a pretty good joke, especially for 9:30 in the morning. I got no reaction whatsoever from this woman. She just stone-faced me. And I'm like, okay, great. Lesson learned. Don't make jokes at the fertility clinic.
Maybe she's heard that like 1,000 times.
If she's heard that 1,000 times, then what other fucking comedians are ending up at this clinic?
We're in LA. That was in Beverly Hills.
That's very true. Yeah, I'm sure Sebastian Maniscalco went in and said the exact same thing. I go into this room and literally this is where we start. This is a bathroom, right? So I am getting game face on. I'm ready to go. And when I see the alternative methods thing, I do start thinking about it. But I have been masturbating professionally for a very long time. At this point, 20 something years. And I'm like, Alex, you know what you're doing here. Get in there and just get it done. I do. Bullseye, straight into the cup, giant load. I go out there and I give it to the nurse and I do ask her, I'm like, so, hey, I saw the sign. alternative methods? What are we doing? And she looked at me very earnestly and said, we give you an extra thick condom. You go home, have intercourse with your wife, tie it up, and you bring it back. And I'm like, oh, right. And then I started thinking that's actually way more gross than what I thought it would be, because I'm thinking they're going to come in here and give you a little digital hand job, or maybe they have some sperm milking device, like a milking machine like they use for horses. That's what I was thinking was going to happen. The idea that I would come into a hefty bag and then have to drive to the clinic without trying to hit any potholes on LA streets, spilling 10 million of my own children in my lap while I drive, that's fucking disgusting. So I am glad that that was not the case and I did not have to do that. And results came back immediately. The next day, I get a phone call and I am super nervous because Lauren has already put it in my head that I've been smoking pot my whole life, that now the sperm are going to be stoned as well, and that they're not going to know where to go.
You're inventing, this is part of your bit that is not actual part of the science that I've explained, but go ahead. I don't want to ruin your bit.
No, it's fine. What is the science behind it?
It's not that your sperm are stoned. It's that it just impacts what they're doing. It's a great comedy bit to say that, but that's not the actual science behind it.
They're not stopping for Taco Bell on the way to the ovum? Something like that?
Something, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. The doctor immediately starts the conversation by saying, your sperm is unbelievable. Go on. Apparently, so on a lower end, what they're looking for is like 30 million sperm. And then he said you had 390 million, which I do the math in my head. That sounds like way too many. That is a dangerous amount of sperm. I don't want that many sperm. I want to have one baby with you, maybe two. Now we're talking about 390. This is running of the bulls situation going on inside my pelvis. That is terrifying to think about. 390 million. But then he actually offered, he said, your sperm is so good that we're going to give you a free session. So if you want to come back in a couple days and do another one. And I'm like, cool, I don't turn down anything free. Like, I mean, I have to pay for guacamole at Chipotle, but now I get to jizz in a cup for free at this medical clinic in Beverly Hills. Fuck yeah, dude. Let's go.
I'm just curious. At this point, we're not going there because we're concerned about infertility, right? If this was like, someone who's listening to this podcast might be more nervous about their results. Were you concerned at all? Were you worried that something was going to be wrong with your sperm? How does that feel?
Of course I was worried, because you never want anything to have to impact your possible future in this fertility world. Even though I knew, yes, we were pregnant, there was still part of me that was going, yeah, but you don't know what this result is going to be. I don't know words like motility. So, of course, I was concerned. I did not expect that kind of number. That's just absolutely insane. I asked for one piece of cheese and they gave me an entire pizza. I will say this. When I went back to that clinic for that free session, I walked in there with so much swag. I was a different person. The first time I was nervous, very sheepish when I walked in. And this time I came in and I swore like the nurses were looking at me a little bit different. Like one of them was like, please stay 10 feet away from the reception desk. You could get any one of us pregnant at any time. Because now I'm feeling like, oh, I am a baby making machine. Nothing can stop me. I already got my wife pregnant. And now I got this whole jar. I could get the entire country pregnant right now with my sperm. This is exciting. That's such a man perspective, though, isn't it?
I wonder, so I don't know. You have the opposite experience, but I know that a lot of couples and men that are going through this might have the opposite result, right? Like, what if their count is low? What if the sperm is a problem? How would you, do you have any?
it would be concerning because then, first of all, you'd already put in my head about the weed thing. I'd be thinking about that a whole lot. But then you'd start thinking like, okay, do I stand near a lot of microwaves, or is there something that I've done in my life to make my sperm count low? Is my diet bad? That's one of those things that it seems like it's out of your control, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So if my sperm count had been low, it definitely would have affected me. Not that I ever feel like less like a man, because that's not really a problem that I have, because I barely feel like a man most of the time anyway. But yeah, that would have been tough news to take. And I'm not sure what we would have done in that situation, or what. I don't know what the protocol is for a doctor to tell you when he says, hey, just so you know, there were like 3 guys in there barely hanging on. They're basically shriveling up inside of you. I don't know what to do about that, you know?
All right, so we've got sperm on ice. We've got a baby on the way, and it's time to start chemotherapy.
Yeah, here we go.
This is all in between. We have not been to the OBGYN yet. This is probably halfway through September, maybe towards the end of September, we get to your first chemo appointment. We prepared for the worst in terms of side effects. You've seen it all. Like, are you going to lose your hair? Are you going to be nauseous all the time? Or are you just going to be like, curled up on the couch for the next 6 months?
For sure. Fatigue, infections, bruising, throwing up, all of the things. I mean, the one I'm most concerned about is my hair, because my hair is a signature. It's one of my trademarks. Hooper Hair Puff is my social media and has been for years. People know me for my hair. That's what I'm worried about. But also just that I'm going to get weak and that I'm going to just be kind of stumbling around, barely able to take a step. That's a very scary thing for me. I'm a mobile person. I'm active. I play sports. And I am happy to say that chemo barely affected me. In the first couple rounds, especially, I was flying. I would literally go to chemo and the next day wake up and play tennis and go to shows at night. I barely felt anything wrong with me. I'll tell you this. If you ever get cancer, there's one thing that a mentality that I chose to have that I think was very good. And it's that I went into every appointment, instead of being nervous and frustrated, upset that I had to go through this experience and spend this time here, I went into every appointment going, this is good because we are eliminating more cancer. I am getting healthier every single time I come in here. So instead of being fearful of going to the doctor, I looked forward to every single chemo session because I knew every one was one step closer to getting rid of those 12 and probably, hopefully, being cancer-free after that. So mentality is everything when you have an illness like cancer.
Yeah, we've been through at least one chemo session at this point, and we were very ginger at the time. Like, oh, you're going to need to go home and rest. We planned for you to have side effects, and then they just never came.
Yeah, how many different pills did I get prescribed?
Oh, the bags of pills, and you just never needed them.
Yeah, literally, we just left Macy's with a huge shopping bag, the big brown bag full of just all these pills and things I'd never heard of before. And it turns out I didn't need most of them. I took the nausea pills because I thought I had to, and then I just never threw up. I never felt that way. I was like, you're fine, Alex. You got this shit.
Yeah, so we're getting closer to finally going to the prenatal appointment. I'm literally decorating the nursery in my head, and you're out there playing tennis and beating cancer.
Yeah, I'm beating my opponents and beating cancer, which, by the way, infuriated my friends that I play tennis with. They told me my cancer is a lie. I'm making it up so I can get further in my career, so I can get sympathy points. Because nobody wants to get beat by someone that actively has cancer and is going through chemotherapy. But sorry, my tennis skills were not sick. So I just kept smashing forehands and pissing off my opponents, which felt amazing. I mean, God damn it. Here I am having to go the day before to a clinic and lay in a giant old lazy boy and get this weird liquid shot into my body. And then the next day I'm just smoking shots on a tennis court. God, that felt fucking good.
Okay, so I am counting down the days until our first prenatal appointment. You know when you want something so badly and you're so excited about it, it's all you can think about? That's me right now and going through the cancer treatment with you.
Well, it was nice to go to a different type of doctor appointment.
It was definitely nice. That was a place where healthy people go.
Yeah.
So we drive over to see my OBGYN. It's the normal, like, routine things. I pee in a cup. They weigh me, which always gives me anxiety every time I go to the doctor. It's just like, they tell me I'm too big. I'm barely pregnant yet, but I'm already, like, worried about being told I've gained too much weight in pregnancy. That's just the way my brain works. I'm just always super conscious. It's always something that gives me anxiety every time I go to the doctor and they weigh me. So we go through that. We get put into the room. At this stage during pregnancy, it's a vaginal ultrasound, which if you're going through fertility treatments, you're highly familiar with. But if not, it's they don't do it on top of the stomach like you see on TV or like you're used to. You would expect from an ultrasound. It goes in through the vagina.
It looks like a magic wand vibrator.
With a condom on it, yeah.
Right. They don't want you to get pregnant again.
Nope. So this is the moment everything changes. This is your trigger warning in terms of pregnancy loss.
Bum, bum, bum.
You might want to tune out now. So the doctor says, yes, you are pregnant, but it's very small. And that's my movie moment where, like, the bomb goes off and just, like, my heart drops out and, like, there's, like, piercing noise in my ears. Oh, this thing that I was holding on to all this hope for is not real. I could tell by her tone. It was just like, oh, this is it. There was no, like, wait, but it's small. What if it, I never had that moment of, like, well, are you sure it's not a viable pregnancy? I mean, it was like, oh yes, this is what's happening.
I had that moment where she just said it's small, where I'm thinking, okay, well, what do we need to do? Like, let's beef it up. Like, give it some protein. What do we need to do to grow this thing? I knew it wasn't great, but I didn't immediately think this is over.
So she asks, are you sure of your last period date? And I'm like, yes, I'm sure. I'm pretty sure when I ovulated too. Basically, the baby was measuring, at like 6-7 weeks, and it should have been at 8 or 9 weeks. I think because I was so certain of all those things, that's how I knew immediately. I had no bleeding. I had no signs of pregnancy loss at that time, which is why it was such a shock to me. I will say in retrospect, I would have taken more than one pregnancy test, although at 6 or 7 weeks, I don't know that I would still be taking pregnancy tests. But if I had continued to take them, I might have seen that line start to fade if the hormone that the pregnancy test detects starts to go down because you are no longer pregnant. That could have been a way to see it coming. The Lauren that went through that experience more than 2 years ago was not thinking that way, was not, always trying to protect herself from disappointment. So the doctor explains that you've had a miscarriage, which is basically you had a miscarriage, but your body isn't aware of it. You don't have any signs of it. So you have 3 options. You can wait and just let your body handle it naturally. It will eventually at some point. Another option is to take medication to naturally induce not naturally, but to induce the miscarriage. The third is surgery, which is a DNC, which is
a Democratic National Convention.
It's the same procedure as an abortion. The medication, it's the same medication as medicated abortion minus a couple pills. I believe, I'm not an expert, but I believe that when you do a medicated abortion, the abortion pill, it's these plus other pills.
Gotcha. Okay. Plan B plus plan C, plan D, plan E.
Yeah. Sure.
That's what my brain says. Yeah. And so what happens next? How are you?
So I'm the logical one. Remember, I think you were just like, how are you? Like, I remember us having this conversation probably days later. I'm just like, okay, what are my options? I'm engaging with the doctor and going through the process. She's like, look, you don't have to make this decision right now. Go home, take a couple days, think about it, and let me know what you want to do. So it was, those were the choices. Obviously, I was not ready to make a decision, but she left the room and I had to get dressed. And how are you feeling?
Once again, I have disassociated from this news. Now, I heard it. I heard the term miscarriage, which I thought was quite redundant. I remember thinking that. But also, I just realized, fuck, we're not pregnant. What does this mean? For weeks now, I've been getting on board with this whole, like, oh my God, we're going to be pregnant. We are pregnant. We're going to have a baby on the other side. I'm going to beat cancer and then we're going to have a baby. This is so exciting. And this is all the more motivation. And this is a shot through the fucking chest. The emotional side of me, which is 99% of me, is absolutely just shattered. The doctor leaves the room. You had to get dressed. I just felt like a shell of myself. And I could only imagine what you were going through And walking out of there sucked.
I remember. So I think at this point, I'm still holding it together. I'm very good at holding it together.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I had to like pay for the visit or something. Like I remember
God, what a fucking cruel joke.
you know what? They sent me a refund though.
Did
I got
they?
a check in the mail, like, I don't know, months later. And I was like, okay, I mean, I guess I'll take my $60 back or whatever.
All right, score one for the fertility clinic.
And that was not a fertility clinic. That was just a regular OBGYN.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, so I think I had to pay, and then I don't know if you remember this, but then we were like going to get on the elevator, and there was like a woman with a stroller. And she was like couldn't get it out, and she was like in our way, and I was just like, get your fucking kid out of my way. I didn't say that out loud.
No, of course you didn't.
And through all this, I am not bitter about other people having children. There are singular moments, and that was one of them where I had some bitterness about it, but understandably so in that moment. And somehow we get through we get in the elevator, we get back down to the car, and I'm like, I can't drive. Like, that's once I get in the car, I break down.
It was before when we were in the parking garage. As soon as we walked in the parking garage and realized nobody was around and we were near the car, we hugged each other and we both just wept hard. I mean, shoulder shaking, visibly, barely able to breathe, just like our hearts pumping in unison together at the realization of this loss. We had never felt anything like that before. And no matter what anyone tells you about how a miscarriage feels or what it will do to you emotionally, you can't prepare yourself. It was so much more devastating than I ever could have imagined, because you think, well, look, we were only pregnant for like 6 or 7 weeks. There wasn't that much time to really get excited. It's not like we saw your belly growing. It's not like we felt the baby kicking, but we were mentally in that headspace of, oh my fucking God, we did it. We're going to be parents. This is so exciting. So to have that ripped away from us in a moment, showing up to that appointment thinking, oh, this is exciting. They're going to our first OBGYN appointment. We're going to learn all the things that we have to do. And then having them immediately go, no, in fact, we need you to make a decision about how this dead fetus is going to come out of you. Which, fuck, dude.
Yeah, so once we got in the car, was just like, the shaking, sobbing, crying, which is not how I have not experienced a lot. And I couldn't drive. I had driven us there, and I was just like,
yeah, I drove us home.
Yeah, somehow you drove us home. I don't know how you managed that. And then we got home and immediately just crawled into bed with our 2 dogs. This little boy right here, if you're watching on, and just like held them and cried into them. And they were I was so grateful for those 2 at the time.
Yeah, we needed something. It's inexplicable how you feel after this instance, and there's nothing you can do to make you feel better. You don't know whether to talk about it or to stay silent or just to hole up in bed and cry. Thankfully, neither of us had anything to do for the rest of the day. I don't know why. Oh, because you were working from home at the time.
Yeah, I was still working for myself full time.
Yeah, and I didn't have a show that night, so thank fucking God, because I would have gone on stage and probably had to talk about it, which was not the time. I was not ready to do that. So instead, we ordered pizza, didn't we? Didn't we go, what do we want to eat today? That just comfort food that will make us feel.
Yeah.
We didn't want to cook anything, and so we ordered pizza from our favorite spot, a lot of it. For the rest of the day, we just kind of try to hold ourselves together, but there was so much time we were just sitting together, staring at each other, and then one of us would start crying and the other one would, because we didn't know what to say to each other. Of all the things we've been through together over the past 18 years, whatever it had been, this was a whole new level of pain that we were not ready to experience.
Yeah, but it was kind of the start of it all, you know?
Well, sure. And what's really funny is I said, Lauren, look, we can't just keep sitting here and staring at each other. Let's put on a movie that both of us know, like we watched when we were kids or something, like something that is nostalgic and just feel good. And I asked you, because I have a lot of movies from my childhood that I watched all the time. Lauren has a very different catalog of movies that she used to watch. So I was like, what would make you feel good in this moment? What is something that you do not have to pay attention to? It will just be on in the background. And you said Armageddon.
I watched that movie a bunch growing up.
Right. And because your uterus was going through Armageddon, we decided that we should also go through Armageddon and see if we can blast this rock up before we blast this baby up.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
It is a good movie. It is a cheesy, fucking great movie. And I'm really glad that we watched it. It's funny to think like, hey, you just got some of the worst news of your life. You still have cancer. Now you had a miscarriage. What do you want to do? And
hey, it puts things in perspective, right? There's not a meteor about to collide with Earth.
kind of wish there was, though, in that moment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, somehow we make it through the next few days. I do have to deal with the fact that there is still a dead baby inside my body that needs to come out. Ultimately, I decide to go with the medication option. I wasn't really into the like wait around for it, but also I had never had much surgery. I think the only time I'd been under anesthesia was when I got my wisdom teeth taken out as a kid. So I just was like, surgery seems intense. We're not like in a super rush to start again. We weren't emotionally ready to try again. So let's do the medication option. So I messaged my doctor. She's like, okay, we'll send in the prescription. Just so you know, expect it to be like a very heavy period. I'm going to throw another trigger warning up here about miscarriage, about it's going to get graphic. I just want to, no one prepared me for this. So if I can prepare anyone, or if anybody can commiserate with how fucking terrible this is, I want to help you.
This part gets really graphic and intense.
I was like, all right, let's do this. Again, I was working for myself. I was working from home. So I could I wasn't too concerned about like, oh, I got to go to work tomorrow. What's the situation going to be? I just like went, I picked up the prescription. Let's get this over with. It's a couple of capsules you take vaginally. It doesn't start working immediately. It takes a little bit of time to start. But basically it opens up your cervix and kind of makes you naturally start to bleed out. But when you've been carrying a pregnancy for a couple of days or weeks or months even, there's a lot more tissue that builds up. It's the uterine lining. It's not just the baby. It's all the gooey, cushy stuff that the baby, floats around in.
Delicious.
So you were warned.
I know, of course. I know what's coming.
No, I'm at the pharmacy and picking up the prescription. I was like, oh, I should get some pads. And so they have the heavy pads and then they have the giant diaper pads. And I was like, oh, I'll go with the heavy pads. Big mistake.
Why?
Big mistake. That was not enough. I should have gotten them to show you the difference, because I still have it's like ones that are this big versus ones that are this big.
Yeah, you're like, where are the down comforters in this?
I should have gotten diapers. And if I ever have to go through this again, and I hope not, and I hope no one listening to this ever has to go through this, just buy adult diapers. Like that would have been better than the amount of leaking, the amount of the regular heavy pads. I was changing them every 15 minutes. So
I wonder how many people buy Depends for this purpose.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. So there is just so much blood and cramping. The cramping was highly unpleasant, but the cramping was not what was so concerning to me as the fact that there was so much blood, and the blood clots, the pieces of tissue were large. I could feel them falling out of me sitting on the toilet. Like there were periods of time where I was just literally like, I just want to sit on the toilet because at least it wasn't going everywhere.
Right.
This goes on for a couple days, and you know me, surprise, surprise, Lauren's Googling.
Lauren's learning all about what should be falling out of me right now.
And it's like, am I hemorrhaging? Do I need to go to the hospital? And Google was unclear. I eventually found something that said, if your clots are bigger than a lemon, go to the hospital. And all I could think was, what kind of lemon, right? Like a Meyer lemon, those are like small. They were definitely the size of a Meyer lemon, but like a regular giant Southern California grocery store lemon, no, they weren't that big. So I'm just like panicking. I think I said to you, like, if I die, if you see me faint, take me to the hospital. I think I'm getting better at this now about like asking for help and not having to always be in control of things. But I was scared and I was not prepared for what this experience was.
Who could have prepared you? Like, I don't think
the doctor.
Yeah, I mean, the doctor could have said something, but at the same time, I guess they don't really know exactly. I mean, in retrospect, they should have said, hey, just so you know, it could be a golf ball, it could be a basketball, and we don't know what's about to come out of you here. So yeah, that lemon, that's a scary thought.
Okay, so after spending a few days thinking I was bleeding out, and you're still
cancering it up.
Yeah, but like doing okay with the chemo. Like every time we went, we expected side effects and symptoms. And you were still just like, every time we were getting lucky.
Right. And people kept warning me, it's just the beginning. After you've had a few treatments, they will collectively start to add up and you will start feeling side effects. It will hit you eventually. And I was just like, all right, bring it on.
At this point, an opportunity comes up for me to, after I get through this miscarriage, an opportunity comes up for me to go with my sister and a bunch of friends to this party in Mexico. It's like on the Baja. You drive there, you drive through the border. It's then like, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes south of the border.
Yeah, it's Rosarito, right?
It's south of there.
It's just south of Rosarito.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's north of Ensenada.
Gotcha.
Yeah, right in between there. So, and I was like, this sounds fun. This sounds like a little bit of joy. Like, I just need to do something to sort of break me out of my shell. You were like so encouraging of me to go. I don't know. You must have had shows, or there was a reason you didn't go.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the major thing is you needed to do something for yourself because you were so in this place of loss, confusion, and continually putting yourself into this place of, I need to learn what happened. I need to figure out what to do next. And I was like, babe, what you need to do is take your mind off it and go have some fun. And because it was our friends throwing this mini festival with like 75, 100 people right on the beach, in this giant mansion, I was like, you are going to go, you're with friends, your sister's going, you can dance, you can just get in the water if you need to, whatever you need. Being here is not going to help you right now.
Yeah. And you were doing fine. Like, I was concerned about leaving you, but again, like, no side effects, playing tennis every day.
Right. And I was still affected by the miscarriage. Obviously, I did not just throw that out of my brain immediately, but also I was focused because I still had to deal with this cancer inside of me. You didn't have to deal with that part. And because I didn't need you anymore for appointments, I was like, babe, I'm good. I'll watch the dogs. Please go take a couple days for yourself and go down to Mexico. Enjoy.
Yeah. So right before I went back to the OBGYN to make sure that the miscarriage had completed itself. It had not. She was like, you should probably take the medication again. If it doesn't work after that, then we'll discuss the other options. And I was like, okay, do I have to do it right now? And she was like, no, you can wait a week. There's literally no rush. And I was like, great, because I am going to go have fun in Mexico. I will say that like the second time I did the medication, it was not that bad. It was probably like a heavy period, and that, completed the miscarriage, and we were okay from that point on.
I mean, how many lemons were going to be inside you, right?
Right. Yes. The first round really did its job.
When life gives you lemons.
So I had a lot of fun in Mexico. I come back, and I think it's time for another chemo session at that point.
Yeah, this is chemo session number 4. And this is when people told me that I'd really start feeling it. And I was like, okay, whatever. But again, I came home from that chemo session and I felt pretty good. And I usually did chemo on a Tuesday. Yeah, on a Tuesday. And for the next day, I was pretty beat up. I did not feel good. And that night I have a show at the Irvine Improv, which it takes about an hour and a half to get down there, not as long to get back. But I went with my friend Omid, and I remember being on stage and just feeling a little like woozy. I didn't feel great. I get back home, and I remember the drive back from Omid's. I was just like, I was cold. I was shaking a little bit. I felt out of sorts. I got back here, and you noticed immediately that I was not in a good place.
Your nervous system was just like inflamed. I could just see you had just been like going like crazy, and I was very worried about you. It seemed like you were like coming down with the flu. It seemed like that kind of thing.
I was shaking pretty much uncontrollably, but you were like, okay, go to sleep. Just go to sleep. It's late anyway. Go to bed. So I go to bed and I wake up the next morning, and then the next night I have a show in Santa Barbara. So I was like, okay, am I going to go to Santa Barbara tonight? And I was like, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I should do this. I'm supposed to headline this show, do 45 minutes. I can't even sit straight, let alone think about my jokes. And I never cancel a show. I never do that. But I was like, I have to cancel. I'm going to cancel all of my shows for the entire week. And so I canceled Santa Barbara. I had a show at the Comedy Store that week. I canceled that one. I'm not in a good place. And at that point, I just started sleeping a lot. because I felt so shitty and tired. And all those thoughts of everything people told me, like, fourth treatment, just wait, fourth treatment, you're not going to be playing tennis anymore. I was like, fuck, they were right. I even made a video. I remember making a reel, like, when you think you're doing well on chemo until that fourth treatment.
I would love to take a look at that again.
It's on there. It's on my Instagram. I still know where it is. Now, for me, the next few days get pretty spotty. You have a much better recollection of what happened next.
Yeah, so you wouldn't eat. Like, could not convince you to eat, like, just any food whatsoever. I would bargain with you to drink protein shakes because I was, like, concerned about your health. You need to be taking in nutrition. I would go to the store, like, once or twice a day. I'd be like, here's a Cliff Bar. Would you just please eat this Cliff Bar? And you take one bite of it and then, like, lay back down. And it was insane to me that you were just straight up refusing food for days.
And I eat a lot. When food is in front of me, I cannot stop myself from eating it. And so the fact that I just had no desire whatsoever to eat even once a day, that is such a foreign concept to me and to you that clearly you knew something is not adding up. This is worse than usual.
Yeah, so this is, as the week progresses, it only gets worse. And now it's not just even that you're sleeping. You would just be, like, laying at the couch staring at the ceiling for, like, hours and hours. And I'd be like, do you want to turn it on the TV? And you'd be like, You were really starting to slip away mentally. And again, chemo brain, you know? Like, it was so easy to just go, these are chemo side effects. We have not seen them yet, but here they are. It's natural. Of course, this is what's going on.
I have this foggy memory of you making me alphabet soup, and I was staring into that bowl, looking at these letters, and I was just transported, like, into the cosmos, looking at stars floating away. And that's all I remember from this moment, because also I knew I had a doctor's appointment that next Monday, and it was already something like Saturday by the time we were in this really bad state. And you were like, okay, we have a doctor's appointment on Monday. We're going to tell them everything and we're going to figure out what the fuck is going on here.
You were also at the time self-medicating with weed.
A lot of weed.
Which is natural. And you had, I'm going to let you give us the terminology for it, but we have some friends that grow it and distribute it. And they had sent you, like, that jar.
Yeah.
What's that called?
It's a jar of concentrate, essentially, but it's in this gel, like, ooze, almost oily form, but you don't smoke it. You can put a little bit on top of, like, a bowl or something like that, or a little bit in a joint, but you can also just, like, eat, like, a little bit of it, and it will fuck you up beyond compare. So because I was like, well, I have kids go through chemotherapy, and they say chemo and marijuana go hand in hand. So I'm like, okay, let me just get fucking ripped on this shit, and then I will just completely evaporate the pain and the confusion that I feel, because I will just zone out completely if I get stoned. And that's what you think is going on with me, is that I have just taken way too much of this concentrate.
Yeah, the spaciness, especially with the soup, I was just like, oh, that's what's going on. It's the chemo side effects plus this very concentrated high dose marijuana.
It's called Rick Simpson oil.
Okay. That's what you're dealing with, and I just don't understand. And it's Saturday night. We can make it to Monday morning when he's got the doctor's appointment, and they'll tell us, oh, yeah, that's what's going on. This is all fine and normal.
I have no memory of this whatsoever, because I was on a distant planet. I'm not eating, I'm sleeping, and if I'm not sleeping, I'm just sitting there. I can't communicate. I don't know if something's actually wrong here or not.
Looking back now, the signs were there. But when you're in it and you're dealing with someone you love who's basically like a shell of themselves, it's really hard to watch.
I'm in it, but I have no idea what's going on because my brain has gone somewhere completely different. I'm not thinking about anything at that point.
I thought it was the weed. I thought it was the chemo. I was like, this is what cancer treatment looks like. This is normal. Little did we know at that point, you were fighting for your life.
But that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves.
Yes. Join us next time for what I refer to as the worst month of our life.
And that's saying a lot.
Right. We've just been through a cancer diagnosis and a miscarriage, and the worst month hasn't even started.
Oh, I can't wait for episode 3.
We'll see you next time.
Tune in to Hopefully Kidding.